Oh, fuck you. Hey, Cynthia. Probably should talk about it later. Okay. Yeah, thanks. Yeah, bye. Hey, Anna, can you see I should make you a co-host, I guess, shouldn't I? Because you can't see. Well, I'm just, yeah. Okay, good. That, okay, well, if you just change the name on the screen, you can do it too. Oh, okay. Okay, thanks. Bye. Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
We can hear you. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Hearing Examiner.
Good morning. We're about at 9 o'clock. So let's get started. Good morning, everyone. This is the public comment hearing for the proposed merger and acquisition of Public Service Company of New Mexico and PNM Resources by a corporate organization headed by Avangrid, Inc. and Iberdrola. Thank you all for being here. My name's Ashley Scheinauer. I'm the hearing examiner assigned to this case. We have a number of people already on the Zoom call. I see Commissioner Maestas. I see one of the attorneys for the parties in the case, Jeff Albright, and Christopher Hall. I believe you're the assistant for Commissioner Maestas. Okay. And of course, we have David Lee, who's our court reporter, and Anna Kippenbrock, who has been helping us with all this registration. It's the first time we've been doing this with so many people, so it's going to be interesting. Today's the beginning of the Commission's review process for this merger, and today is the day for oral comments. Wednesday will be the first day of the formal evidentiary hearings. Those hearings will last a week and a half through August the 20th. After the end of the hearings, the parties will file legal briefs. I'll issue a recommended decision. The parties will have the opportunity to file exceptions to the recommended decision. The Commission will review the recommended decision, the exceptions, and the record to reach a final decision. The final decision will likely be issued in late summer or early fall. So here's the procedure for today. It's a little complicated because we're doing this hearing remotely and through Zoom. We can't let everyone join the Zoom conference at the same time because we won't be able to fit everyone on the screen. I and the commissioners and the court reporter need to see you as you're making your public comment. Our legal assistant, Anna Kippenbrock, has organized you into groups of 10 in the order that you've signed up with her. You should continue to watch the session on the YouTube link that's posted on our website until it's time for your group to log in to the Zoom conference. So we'll start with the first group of 10. When they're done, we'll admit the second group and then continue on. When it's time for your group to log in, use the link that Anna sent you. And when you do log in that way, you'll be admitted into a what's called a Zoom waiting room. And wait there until I admit you to join the Zoom call. And that will happen when the group called before you is finished. So please be patient. And an important point too, when your group is admitted into the Zoom call, you should close the YouTube link. There's a several second delay between the audio in the Zoom call and the YouTube link. And if you keep your YouTube link running while you're making your public comment, we will hear the YouTube audio in the background, which will make it impossible to hear what you're saying. So when your group is admitted, I'll call your names for each of your comments, and I'll do that in the order in the list that Anna sent to you. When I call you, you should make your public comment. It should be limited to 3 minutes each. And when you're done, you should exit the Zoom screen so we can let more people in. There are a lot of people who have signed up to make comments, so please be patient. And if you feel that you have more to say than can be said in 3 minutes, please prepare the remainder in written form and file it with the Commission. Those comments can be filed up to the day the Commission takes final action in this case. And we do electronic filings now, so you should email your written comments to prc.records@state.nm.us and include the docket number for this case, which is 20-00222-UT. And if you have any questions, any more questions about how to do that, you can send an email to Anna and she'll help you with that. So the final rule is to speak slowly. Some of you, I'm sure, will be reading from comments that you've prepared. And I know that when people do that, there is a tendency to read fast. And that's going to be difficult for the court reporter to pick up. So even if you're reading your comments, try to speak slowly. And I see we've been joined by Commissioner Fishman too now. And I guess what I'd ask before we actually start the comments, do any of the commissioners have anything they'd like to say before we begin?
Thank you, Mr. Hearing Examiner. Commissioner Maestas is here. I just wanted to welcome everyone that's tuning into this very important proceeding. And I want to thank you for taking time out to make your feelings known and your positions known about this merger. I think it's vital that we hear from all of you and know where you stand. And so, again, I just want to welcome you here and thank you for participating. That's all I had. Thank you.
I'll make well, actually one comment. First of all, ditto to everything Commissioner Maestas said. And our job is to serve in the public interest. And the best way to know what the public interest is to hear the public tell us what it thinks its interest is. And this is your opportunity to do that. And thank you very much for taking the time to do that. So your comments are very important to us. So thank you for being a part of this.
Okay. All right.
Mr. Hearing Examiner,
Yes, Anna.
yes, I am noticing that there are several persons who pertain to other groups that are waiting in the waiting room, but they do not belong to Group A.
Yeah.
Several.
Could I ask the people who are not in Group A to remove themselves until it's their time to make their comment? It's pretty hard to manage all these people in our waiting room. I just want to make sure I have that I get people in who are assigned to this time slot. So I'd appreciate that. Well, let's start with the first commenter, Lars Wells. Let me let's see.
Mr. Hearing Examiner, can I admit the ones that belong to this group all at once?
Yes,
Mr.
please
Wells
do.
is calling. Mr. Wells was just admitted.
Okay. And Mr. Wells, you're muted. Can you unmute yourself? It sounds like you're calling from a cell phone. Okay, well, we'll come back to Mr. Wells. Okay, once you figure out how to get yourself unmuted. The second person on the list is Chris Knight, but I understand that that comment has been withdrawn. Let's go to Isaac Bush.
Mr. Bush is not in the waiting room.
He is?
No, he's not.
Oh, he's not. Okay. Well, let's go to Sheila Baran. Okay, you're muted.
Get mute on the TV.
Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right. Good morning. My name is Sheila. I want to thank the New Mexico PRC for my time here this morning. I am a resident of Albuquerque and a loyal PNM customer. I want to begin by saying I am against this merger for several reasons. My family and I, and our whole community, who I have been talking to for months now, agree on this particular statement. We all believe essential infrastructure like the power grid should be owned and democratically operated by the people it serves. I have done extensive research on Avangrid for months on end. I know that Iberdrola, I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, owns 81.5%, Qatar owns 9%, and I don't believe we need two companies from around the world to run our electric company. I have studied the CMP plant up in Maine. I cannot, after months of research, find one good review. Power outages for up to 4 days. Their bills have tripled. The Connecticut-based Avangrid has faced $25 million in fines by regulatory proceedings to approve this merge. And Connecticut has taken a beating in state regulatory proceedings. In August 1st Journal, the CEO of Iberdrola had to come to New Mexico because Amy, I cannot pronounce your last name, I'm sorry, said he has been less than forthcoming in providing needed information to fully evaluate Avangrid's business dealings. I want to ask, why are the 6 top executives at PNM being given $38 million for this merge? It seems to me and my community, for which I represent, a lot of people are not just the CEO of Iberdrola, are not being forthcoming. Perhaps this isn't all profit driven. I don't know. I want to finish with an article that was in yesterday's paper. There was a young lady from Maine that writes in and says, I should say up front, I'm not from New Mexico. I have no family in New Mexico. I have no friends. I've never even visited. And then she goes on to share her horror story of the CMP plant. She ends it with, the lack of reliable power in Maine is not, as Avangrid would have you believe, because of winter weather. It's not because of trees. The rest of New England also has winters and trees. What separates the rest of New England from Maine is that they don't have a company like Avangrid that fails to deliver reliable power year after year. Avangrid hasn't yet ruined your power. Don't let them. Thank you so much for your time.
Okay, thank you. It looks like Lars Wells is able to speak now. Can you go ahead, Mr. Wells?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great, thank you. Good morning. My name is Lars Wells, and I'm a 30-year customer and ratepayer of PNM. I hope to represent the opinions of most of my fellow 800,000 ratepayers who provide all of the $1.5 billion annual revenue to PNM.
And Mr. Wells, could you slow down? Mr. Wells, could you please slow down? We need to record what you're saying.
Okay. We, the captured ratepayers, are really what is being purchased by Avangrid. What is it that the ratepayers want from an electrical supplier? It's simply 3 things: the highest reliability, the lowest cost, and the least impact on the environment. Question to answer today is, will this acquisition improve all 3 of these over PNM's abilities? First, let's look at some fundamental principles that all corporate acquisitions follow. Foremost, they are always driven by a plan that the acquiring company will increase its revenues. It's never about the customer's benefits. It's not about doing acts of charity for the customers. An acquirer thinks that they can extract more revenue from the customers than the current providers can. And as a captive customers, we cannot reject this outcome by buying elsewhere. Discussion about this acquisition has unfortunately focused on the quote $270 million in public benefits. This is simply a well-played negotiation distraction. On a $4.3 billion acquisition, the difference between the original $25 million offered and the current $270 million is the exact same as the difference between a 6-cent tip or a 60-cent tip on a $10 plate of food. Both numbers are inconsequential. Groups should not judge this deal as acceptable based on a large difference between two tiny numbers. And who is Avangrid and why are they good for us as ratepayers? One of the most utterly foretelling events in marketing this acquisition to us is that the best reason P&M could come up with for selling out was, quote, to introduce New Mexico to Avangrid. As a ratepayer, introducing me to a new company has no value, especially a company with a poor reputation. What I value is reliability, affordability, and minimal environmental impact. And who is Avangrid? Well, corporations have a DNA based on their actions. Avangrid has been touting values, but its DNA regarding customers is evident in Maine, where they rank near the bottom in reliability due to total number of and duration of power outages. New Mexico is already on the bottom of many lists. Electric supply is not one of them yet. Why would we want to fail there too? Reportedly, Avangrid's size will allow it to invest more and faster in new technology than P&M could. However, companies only invest when they expect to extract even more revenue from us ratepayers. This will not be charitable investing. Avangrid's resources will also allow greater ability than P&M to hire more lawyers and administrators to fight, argue, and win its way with the PRC. Ratepayers will lose more often. To conclude, corporate DNA can't be changed with regulations and contracts. To believe this is foolish. P&M has done quite a capable job over the decades providing reliable, affordable electricity. New Mexico ratepayers would now be one of many corporate priorities fighting for dominance in the company spanning the globe, no matter how many New Mexico board members there are. Acquisitions are done in spite of the customers, and a captive customer base is easily exploited. A one-time payment of $270 million is an inconsequential sum to sway approval for selling 800,000 ratepayers a bad deal for decades into the future. This deal is absolutely not in the best interest of the ratepayers in maintaining reliable, cheap, and low-impact electricity. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Wells. Ron Flax-Davidson.
Thank you. My name is Ron Flax-Davidson. I'm an investor and a member of the board of directors of Positive Energy Solar, one of the oldest and largest sellers and installers of customer-owned rooftop solar facilities in New Mexico. To date, there have been over 50,000 rooftop solar installations in New Mexico, paid for by individual customers, providing power at lower costs than utility service and providing over 2,000 direct jobs to New Mexicans. I am deeply concerned about the proposed takeover of P&M by Avangrid Iberdrola, particularly given reports that Avangrid Iberdrola sought to institute changes to the net metering rules in Maine that would have decimated the customer-owned rooftop solar business in Maine. The Energy Transition Act and the coming electrification of the transportation sector will require more than a doubling of current electricity generation in New Mexico, nearly all from renewable sources, and significant changes to how public utilities in New Mexico operate. Customer-owned distributed energy resources like rooftop solar can play a significant role in aiding this transition. Studies have shown that expanding the number of customer-owned distributed energy resources like rooftop solar will lower the public utilities' cost of service, increase jobs and tax revenues for New Mexico, provide greater resiliency to the grid, and reduce harmful climate change emissions. I asked the PRC to require PNM and Avangrid to support the expansion of distributed energy resources in New Mexico, like customer-owned rooftop solar facilities, to maintain net metering rules without change, and to require public utilities in New Mexico, like PNM, to allow the priority interconnection of small, under 50 kW, customer-owned rooftop solar facilities, without requiring such customers to pay the cost of the network upgrades that may be required. Instead, requiring such costs to be shared among all customers, all of whom will receive the benefits from such installations. The PRC should set a goal requiring 20% of all electric supply in New Mexico to be provided from customer-owned distributed energy resources like rooftop solar. Please support these changes to public utility rules and require Avangrid and PNM to maintain and expand distributed energy resources in New Mexico. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next, John Comrie, is that, did I pronounce that correctly?
Pretty close. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity to speak this morning. The purpose of my comments this morning primarily is to introduce you to a report, a significant 100-page report that I have prepared and which I propose to file before the end of August for your consideration. In a perfect world, I would have been able to do this as an intervener and provide some testimony, but that just wasn't possible. My comments are based on one central insight, and that insight is that New Mexico and the country as a whole is in early stages of a revolution in the supply of electricity. For almost 100 years, electricity has been supplied by either investor-owned utilities, municipal utilities, or electric cooperatives. In the next few years in the United States, we are looking at almost certain end of vertically integrated electricity utilities, the construction of huge wind and solar generation, primarily for export, and associated major transmission lines across the country. At the same time as significant distributed energy systems with local control become commonplace. Major economic forces are driving these developments. They can be controlled and managed in certain ways by entities large enough to have an impact, like the New Mexico government and this PRC. However, these forces cannot be stopped. They are at work and they are going to sort of drive change. The second sort of feature of the revolution that we're in is that the recent New Mexico RETA transmission study has established that we have the best combination of natural resources in the country to produce world-class wind and solar electricity on a huge scale. The economic development opportunity, therefore, staring New Mexico in the face is beyond anything we have imagined to date, including the possibility of using solar and wind exports to replace lost fossil fuel revenue, building new research labs, and wind turbine manufacturing plants in New Mexico, and much, much more. Bearing in mind these two sort of central features of the revolution we're in, I believe the content of the report I will provide by the end of August, that the PRC needs to do two things. First of all, assuming that it turns down the Avangrid merger, it should, like the PRCs in several other states, and in my report, I will send you a link to the Hawaii PUC, I think there, which has conducted a major study on the sort of supply of electricity to its residents. And the second sort of recommendation I will make is that the PRC recommend that the New Mexico government initiate a major economic development project to consider how they can best take advantage of these sort of the New Mexico renewable energy resources. I've not bothered to introduce myself here, but I have attached to my comments in their written form a copy of my current biography. So in addition to the report I will file at the end of August, in the next few days, I will file these written comments that has the link to the study in Hawaii. And there are several other PRCs where it's sort of at a critical turning point in their history. They have decided, let's just take a step back, take a look at everything that's going on in this state and look at all the possible frameworks for supplying electricity. So I will file these written comments the next few days, and I'll attach a biography so you have a little bit more information about me. So that's all I have to say this morning. Again, thank you for the opportunity to speak to you.
Okay, thank you. Next is Ray Ellen Smith.
Good morning. Thank you for allowing us to have this opportunity to provide public comment. My name is Ray Ellen Smith. I'm a native New Mexican, a private citizen, retired CPA and management consultant, and president of Indivisible Nob Hill. I represent a group of people who are wholly opposed to this merger between PNM and Avangrid, and we have several deep concerns. When PNM sought out a buyer in 2019, Avangrid stood up to take the bait with bold promises of renewables as an energy resource.
I'm sorry, ma'am, can you slow down? When people sought out a buyer,
When PNM sought out a buyer in 2019, Avangrid stood up to take the bait with bold promises of renewables as an energy source. The truth is, this has been done before in Maine, and the results are far less than what's been promised. Avangrid's takeover of Maine's public utility has been a horrendous experience for ratepayers, so much so that the state legislature is trying to undo it altogether and give Mainers a citizen-owned utility instead. Mainers are suffering from some of the highest rates in the country, some of the worst customer service, the most frequent outages, and there is no remedy in sight. Avangrid has been forced to pay penalties and fines in states in which they operate. Further, Avangrid's parent company is under investigation for bribery and fraud in Spain, and we want to bring this company here. Avangrid is still a huge investor in oil and gas and nuclear power. Do we think their business strategy is going to dramatically change for a small market like New Mexico? I don't think so. So when I ask myself why Avangrid would even want to take over PNM, I have lots more questions than answers. We're a low population state. Why us? Like that old real estate saying, location, location, location. That's why. As reported in the Albuquerque Journal, an official at Avangrid said New Mexico is intended to be a hub to access bigger markets like Arizona, California, and even Mexico. Maine is a hub to other markets also, and look at that history. So once the arms of Avangrid reach out to those lucrative markets, where does that leave us, the ratepayers? Shareholders will be flush, and New Mexico ratepayers will be flushed down a non-renewable toilet. Why do we think Avangrid will support ratepayers when their hub markets are reached? We're a very small fish in that pond. Given Maine's experience, I can't believe Avangrid will take our needs to heart. So I ask PNM, why did you seek out a buyer in 2019? Is it because you can't figure out how to meet the goals set by our governor for renewables? Well, a takeover with Avangrid isn't going to do it either. I recommend PNM get some strategists on board to figure out a way that represents the citizens of New Mexico. And if the shareholders have to take a little less while that happens, so be it. I honestly feel like nobody is hearing us or representing us, the people, the ratepayers, the citizens. I know this is a complicated issue that is hard to comprehend. But like that old saying, insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. If this merger goes through based on what happened in Maine, we truly are insane. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you. We're actually moving pretty quickly here. And I noticed that we've suggested that the login time for Group B is 9:45. I'd suggest that people in Group B try to log in now to get ready to be admitted when the time comes.
Judge,
Yes,
would you please remind the speakers to slow down?
yes, I will. Okay, next on the list, still in the first group, is Marilyn Finkelstein. You're muted.
Okay, can you hear me?
You have to turn off your YouTube.
Okay, I have to turn on the YouTube.
Turn it off.
Let's turn it off. I have my phone on.
Okay, you're connected here twice.
Okay, yeah, because I couldn't get on the other.
Just hold on where you are. Hold on where you are, and I'll remove you from the other one.
Okay, is that good?
Now I think you'll be okay.
Okay, my name is Marilyn Finkelstein, and according to Seth Berry, a 7-term member of Maine House of Representatives and House Chairman of the Committee on Energy, Utilities, and Technology, he does not feel a merger of PNM with Avangrid would benefit New Mexico. Since Avangrid purchased Maine's largest local utility, Central Maine Power, in 2008, their transmission rates have tripled and they have the 10th highest rates in the nation. They have a record of being #1 in power outages, with the second largest outage in the country, the longest outage in the country. A class action suit was taken out by Maine customers to protest unfair new billing systems, and Avangrid was fined $10 million for its disastrous rollout of a new billing system. According to the National Survey of Utility Business Customers, CMP rated last place in 2018, 2019, and 2020. Why is PNM glossing over or ignoring these major problems with Avangrid? Could it be that PNM senior management will receive a combined $38 million in executive compensation? As a retired teacher living on a fixed income, living in New Mexico for 40 years, I cannot afford to have PNM Avangrid merger go through. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next on the list is Ernie C. DeBaca, but I don't see him signed in. Let me just check that again. No, I don't see him. Following is Anna. Were you going to say something?
No, just the same. I don't see him that he logged in.
Okay. And Matthew Gonzalez, I don't see him either.
No, he's not.
Okay. All right. Well, then we're moving on to the second group of people. And the first person on that list is Jacob Evanson. And I don't see him either.
He hasn't logged in yet.
Okay. The second person is Terry Cole, and I do see her. So can you unmute yourself and make your comment? I see your picture. Ms. Cole? Okay, we'll come back to Ms. Cole. Let's see, Cameron Graham is next.
Good morning. I'm Cameron Graham, a volunteer advocate for AARP New Mexico and its 280,000 New Mexico members, many of whom are PNM customers. I co-chair our utility advocacy team, and I have been involved in public utility regulation operations as an attorney and AARP advocate for nearly 50 years. AARP advocates for fair and affordable rates and reliable service. We support sustainable energy policies. This policy also calls for mergers to demonstrate net long-term enduring and sustainable ratepayer benefits. AARP does not take a position for or against this merger. It does believe if the merger is to be approved, it is imperative that protections be in place to ensure New Mexico ratepayers are protected. That this merger presents problems in this regard is evident in the numerous protective steps being advocated and addressed in testimony by numerous parties. One of the main reasons for these concerns is the fact that Avangrid controls both unregulated electric power suppliers and regulated electric service providers similar to PNM. This poses a risk of inappropriate costs being shifted to PNM and its ratepayers. The unregulated entities have a financial incentive to move corporate costs to PNM and favor the purchase of power from Avangrid's unregulated entities. All these costs would be passed on to PNM ratepayers. New Mexico experienced a similar problem with Southern Union Company, a vertically integrated gas utility in the 1970s. Southern Union owned Southern Union Gas Company, the regulated utility, and much of the gas, however, purchased by that utility was from Southern Union's unregulated gas suppliers. The regulators had a great difficulty in effectively regulating this business relationship. When the energy crisis of the 1970s hit, increases in the cost of gas from Southern Union's unregulated operations became so severe that public and political pressure forced Southern Union to spin off its New Mexico operations. Before the spinoff could be completed, those operations were acquired by PNM as part of a settlement of an antitrust suit brought by PNM out of this situation. History shows that the business relationships of the type proposed in this merger are extremely difficult to oversee in a manner that ensures just and reasonable rates for PNM's ratepayers. The quality of service problems Avangrid has experienced and the fact that Avangrid has stated that it's acquiring PNM as a platform rather than to improve PNM's electric operations and service quality raise additional concerns. Given these many issues, AARP urges that the PRC ensure that the proposed protections are adequate to protect PNM ratepayers. The Commission should consider assigning to Avangrid any additional regulatory costs that result from the proposed business relationship and that PNM ratepayers be held harmless from those costs. Thank you for the opportunity of addressing this matter.
Thank you. Let's go back to Jacob Evanson. I see he's just signed in.
Yep. Sorry, guys. I just got here. I'm over in Arizona. A little bit of time difference. Boilermakers Local 627. We work with the power plants up there in San Juan County for PNM and for APS Four Corners. We do the contracted labor work for the power plants, and we do the welding and the rigging and the fitting for the power plants up there. We do support the merger of Avangrid and PNM. We feel like if they utilize the union labor for their projects coming up, then we would be able to help them out with that and to continue having good skilled workforce out on the jobs. So
you did it.
Yeah. Sorry. Oh, sorry. I just barely jumped on, so I was kind of just getting caught up. So that's about all I have to say for today.
Okay. Bye.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Cole, I see you're on and you're ready, I think. You have to unmute. We can't hear you yet. You still have to unmute yourself.
All right, can you hear me now?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, I almost feel like there's someone else muting me on the other end. All right, good morning. I'm Terry Cole, President and CEO of the Greater Albuquerque Chamber of Commerce. I'd like to speak briefly about how excited we are at the prospect of Avangrid coming to New Mexico and why it would be a positive development for our state's economic future. The Avangrid PNM merger will create at least 150 high-paying jobs in our state and likely many more. Ratepayers will see significant and meaningful relief, including $65 million in direct credits over the next 3 years and $15 million in low-income energy efficiency programs. And we'll see an expansion of service to rural areas. As we emerge from a difficult pandemic, help for ratepayers and new high-paying jobs are critically important. But most importantly, Avangrid is a U.S. subsidiary of one of the largest utility companies in the world. It's a well-respected and forward-thinking employer that's driving a global clean economy revolution. Let me tell you what that means for New Mexico and why we should want a front row seat. The proposed merger between PNM and Avangrid will ensure that our state not only keeps up with our American and international competitors, but can actually build an innovative network of renewable energy production. In turn, this will enable us to generate cleaner power on a remarkably large scale and at a remarkably fast pace. As a state with the resources to lead the nation in nearly all forms of energy production, we should welcome Avangrid with open arms. This merger is the key to a cleaner, stronger energy economy, an economy that can power our state, our schools, hospitals, and roads for decades to come. Avangrid intends to be a strong community partner, and we have no reason to believe it wouldn't be. As examples, it will build new lighting infrastructure where it's badly needed in Albuquerque, engage with organizations like ours and other nonprofits working to build a stronger community and help tribal communities affected by our state's ongoing energy transition. Moreover, as a heavily regulated utility company, it will be required to live up to its various commitments and serve our ratepayers well. Avangrid moving to our community is an exciting opportunity that should give us hope for our state's future. As the Chamber, we stand ready to welcome Avangrid and help it succeed for the benefit of all New Mexicans. We ask that you look favorably on this important merger. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Next on the list is Charles Gregory.
Yes, good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Fine. You're going to be hearing from many of us how Avangrid, not by hearsay, but from documented sources, is among the worst ranked power companies in the nation, with the highest rates, the poorest customer service, the lowest reliability of the delivery of power. You're also going to hear from many of us about Avangrid's record of corruption as well as incompetence, and by its attempted cover-up of both. Again, not by hearsay, but by public record. You're also going to hear how Avangrid's main customers realized they were not at the heart of Avangrid's concerns, and about Avangrid's indifference and arrogance in its interaction with those customers. You'll hear all this from many New Mexicans who have heard it firsthand from Avangrid's long-suffering main customers themselves, including a state legislator who was kind enough to give us a fair warning about what PNM is trying to rope us into. You'll also hear from many other alert and well-informed New Mexicans about Avangrid's fake, clean, and renewable energy priorities, and about why it really wants to acquire PNM. You'll hear Avangrid has no more desire to serve New Mexicans than it's had to serve the folks of Maine. You'll hear how we're just a means to an end, the transporting of energy to points south and west beyond our state's borders where there's real money to be made. What you're hearing from me is how disappointed I am in our Attorney General for his role in the questionable legal facilitation of this proposed acquisition. And I'm disappointed in PNM, not just for putting the profits of its stockholders ahead of the welfare of New Mexico customers, but for being so willing to sell us down the river to an out-of-state subsidiary of a foreign corporation with a truly atrocious record of service. It's like an arranged marriage where a father is so eager to unload his unmarriageable daughter that he sets her up with a known abuser who is marrying her for her dowry. In the immortal words of Leonard Cohen, everybody knows the deal is rotten. What you're hearing from me is a plea not to allow PNM to foist Avangrid on us, on yourselves for that matter. or on New Mexico. Please don't. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Gregory. I see someone who may be, let me admit him. Looks like Ernie C. Tabaka may have joined us. Let's go back to him. Okay, Mr. C. Tabaka, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Okay, go ahead.
Hi, sorry for the problem here. You'd think I'd be first time on Zoom. My name is Ernie Cedabaka. I am the president and CEO of the Albuquerque Hispano Chamber of Commerce. We are very much in favor of this merger. It's good to see some of you that I've known in my past life when I was a P&M executive in governmental affairs. I just want you to know, this is coming from my heart here. For many years, I worked there for over 35 years, and in many years worked together with many of the people that put together this merger. We put together, during my time frame, the first utility-backed renewable portfolio standard, and then one of the best energy efficiency laws in the land. But guess what? It wasn't enough. And the people dealing with this, the people in support of Western Resource Advocates, some of the other folks, they're the people that really care about what we're doing here in New Mexico together with PNM and Avangrid. And I want you to know that this is exactly what people have been asking for. A utility that's going to be backing renewable energy, carbon-free by 2035, enough resources to back that up and to be community-based. The merger is unprecedented in the amount of benefits that go towards the community that's affected, the ratepayers. So there's, it's almost impossible to see from my perspective how people would be in opposition to this. It is exactly what we need in New Mexico. And I think it's exactly what we deserve for our customer base and our small businesses that we represent. So with all of that, I just want to say the Albuquerque Hispano Chamber of Commerce is emphatically supportive of this merger. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Going back to the regular order now again, Brian Condit.
Good morning.
Good morning. We can hear you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, commissioners. Thank you, Hearing Officer Schnauer. My name is Brian Condit. I'm Executive Director of the New Mexico Building Construction Trades Council. We build, operate, and maintain our state's power and transmission generating resources throughout the state. We represent over 11,000 construction craft professionals, and our council is in unanimous support of the Avangrid PNM merger. The distinctive and unique confluence of support for this merger by business leaders, labor organizations, community and environmental groups demonstrates the broad and necessary support for this valuable opportunity. The approval of the Avangrid PNM merger by this commission is integral to accomplishing the critical demand for sustainable energy production and to fully engage with the world-class capability and innovation presenting itself to our state. We stand in full support of this. It's time we continue with the progress we've made via the energy transition we find ourselves in today, and now is not the time to stop. So we urge the commission to look closely at this and to consider a broad range of impact this has on our capability and capacity to provide energy to our communities. Thank you for hearing me this morning.
Okay, thank you. Next on the list is John Brandt, but I don't see him anywhere logged in.
he is not.
Okay. Let's go then to Chris Fogel.
Good morning. My name is Chris Fogel. I'm a retired CPA, and I've been a customer of P&M's for over 50 years. And I have a few comments to make. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. The first thing I'd like to comment on is the New Mexico PRC itself and its ability to enforce this agreement down the road. I understand that your jurisdiction is intrastate, and I think that once we move to this merger, we're going to be in a situation where it's more of interstate commerce. And I think that the commission itself will lose control over this agreement. And I think what happened, the net result of that is it's going to take away all recourse by New Mexico to arbitrary decisions, abusive policies, and lack of accountability as demonstrated by Avangrid's historical performance in Maine. The second thing I'd like to comment on is bringing access to wider power markets. Well, wider power markets are subject to greater volatility, as shown in Texas last winter. With the system left over from the destructive effects of Enron, utilities are still trying to gain monopoly power on pricing in the marketplace to force consumers to pay for emergencies brought on by utilities failing to adequately strengthen and modernize their infrastructure in the face of climate change, as well as to prudently provide for alternative power sources such as wind and solar. And the third thing I'd like to comment on is what I perceive to be the relationship between P&M and New Mexicans. P&M was granted a monopoly to provide power to key areas of New Mexico. Along with that grant was a quid pro quo to protect the interest of New Mexico ratepayers. I believe that this transaction betrays that trust. Self-enrichment by P&M's management has been a problem for many years as P&M has moved its focus from New Mexico ratepayers to its stockholders. Failing to adequately invest and develop wind and solar resources for the benefit of New Mexico ratepayers, while holding on to coal and nuclear production facility, penalizes New Mexico ratepayers again and again for the repeated policy and strategic failures by P&M's management. My fourth point is that even though Avangrid is a U.S. subsidiary, the parent corporation is a non-U.S. corporation, and the purchase of P&M by Avangrid creates a transfer of profits not only out of New Mexico, but out of the country as well. New Mexico will be limiting its ability to control its own future and will continue to remain behind its neighbors in terms of economic growth. And that does not even begin to consider the security issues of granting access and control to New Mexico's and the United States power grids by a foreign entity. Thank you again for allowing me to comment on this merger. I am against it in every form. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you.
Mr. Hearing Examiner, that's
Yes.
second. So I admitted Carlos, iPad 8. I don't know if Carlos is the same person as Charles Gregory.
Now, Charles Gregory already did make his comment.
Okay, so.
Well, let's see. Carlos, can you tell us? Have you signed up? Are you Carlos Diaz?
You're on mute, sir.
Okay, well, we're going to move on with the next person on the list. But before we do that, I think we are moving fast. I think it would be a good opportunity now for Group C to try and admit themselves into the waiting room. So let's do that, and let's proceed with Ashley Wagner.
Good morning. I'm Ashley Wagner, Vice President of Public Policy and Communications with the New Mexico Chamber of Commerce, formerly Association of Commerce and Industry, and we support this merger. As a representative of New Mexico's business community, I advocate for a responsible, clean energy transition for our local businesses and communities. In 2019, our organization was part of—
Ms. Wagner, do you have something going in the background
Can you
there?
hear me? Can you hear
Okay,
me?
now, Mr.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we do, but we shouldn't be hearing you right now. Let's let Ms. Wagner make her comment, and we'll get to you in a little bit.
And can you hear me all right?
Yes, I can hear you fine now.
Okay, I'll continue. Thank you.
Sorry.
No problem. In 2019, our organization was part of the groundswell of Energy Transition Act supporters and advocates that worked hard to get the bill passed. That year, we stood together and established our state as a national leader in this clean energy transition. No longer at the bottom of all the good lists, we now lead the pack. The Energy Transition Act is a testament to the amazing things New Mexicans can accomplish when we all work together. That historic bill gained national attention and drew other like-minded entrepreneurs, businesses, and economic developers to our beautiful state. Our cleaner energy transition is truly great for business and our communities. That's why we support the merger between the Public Service Company of New Mexico, PNM, and Avangrid. As the impacts of climate change become more pronounced around the world, the PNM Avangrid merger will help our state reach the goals of the Energy Transition Act to increase the use of renewable energy. And what better partner than Avangrid, which was recognized as one of the world's most ethical companies in 2021 for the third year in a row. As part of the deal, PNM and Avangrid have agreed to work aggressively toward reduction of carbon emissions with clear benchmarks and timetables to monitor progress, and the merger will allow New Mexicans to be served by an experienced electric utility with the financial resources to make vital investments in our power grid. But those aren't the only benefits. PNM and Avangrid have committed to contributing millions of dollars to economic development projects or programs in New Mexico over the 3 years following closing, including funding earmarked specifically for Indigenous community groups in the Four Corners region. The total economic benefit to the state is estimated to be around $200 million in wages and economic activity. That includes creating 150 full-time, high-paying jobs to New Mexico, each with an expected average salary of more than $90,000. For all these reasons, the New Mexico Chamber of Commerce asks you to support the PNM Avangrid merger. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next is Randy Royster.
Good morning, and thank you to the commissioners to allowing me to have this time to speak this morning. I'm Randy Royster. I'm president and CEO of the Albuquerque Community Foundation. We're a permanent charitable endowment with a grant-making program that can potentially fund any 501c3 charitable organization. We're the largest public foundation in New Mexico, 40 years old this year. We're one of 10 community foundations in New Mexico and more than 800 nationally. We also have a separate LLC, the New Mexico Community Trust, which is providing the same services that we provide in the greater Albuquerque metropolitan area to communities that are not actively served by another community foundation. I'm participating this morning to support the pending merger of PNM and Avangrid with great enthusiasm. There are many excellent reasons for this merger to be approved, but I'm going to speak specifically to PNM and PNM foundations and Avangrid's generous cultures of giving and participation in the communities in which they serve. PNM has been one of the most generous organizations in New Mexico, truly walking their talk They support countless nonprofit organizations throughout the state. And whether it's communities facing severe weather and disasters or employees in crisis, COVID-19 relief, New Mexicans struggling to pay their electric bills, or the nonprofit sector in New Mexico, all of us would be more challenged than ever if it weren't for the constant support of good corporate citizen PNM and PNM Foundation. And I'm excited to see through research that Avangrid intends to build upon PNM's giving history and expand it. Last year, Avangrid, through its foundation, gave more than $4.2 million to support education, training, and research, biodiversity and the environment, arts and culture, and community partnerships and social action. In fact, educational institutions in Maine have talked about how important it has been to have Avangrid supporting it. Avangrid's parent company, Iberdrola, also gives generously and has been named one of the world's most ethical companies by the Ethisphere Institute. After reading all that will come to New Mexicans through Avangrid, I'm greatly encouraged for the benefits on the table, especially the ones for rural areas of the state, including Avangrid affiliates working with the Navajo Nation to develop on Navajo Nation land within 2 years of closing, one or more renewable energy and/or energy storage projects of no less than 200 megawatts. Also, $2.5 million each year for 5 years benefiting impacted Indigenous community groups in our Four Corners region of the state. They're also committing $50 million in rate credits to customers over a 3-year period after closing, $6 million for residential customer arrearages forgiveness within 90 days of closing, $2 million for providing electricity to new customers in remote areas, and $15 million for low-income energy efficiency. Whenever a new player comes to town, it makes sense for us to look skeptically at them. But after analysis and history as a guide, I believe Avangrid will be an excellent corporate citizen and look forward to the great things it will bring to our state. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next on the list is Rob Black.
Good morning, commissioners, and thank you for the opportunity to speak with you this morning. I'm the president and CEO of the New Mexico Chamber of Commerce. The Chamber has been supporting the business community in Mexico for over 60 years as ACI and representing businesses from every industry in counties all over the state. I took the leadership role of the Chamber 3 years ago when I returned to New Mexico after a couple of decades in the Bay Area in California. Immediately prior to taking my role at the Chamber, I was the Senior Director for Community Relations and head of the Foundation for Pacific Gas and Electric, one of the largest combined gas and electric companies in the country, with one of the lowest carbon emissions per kilowatt hour of any energy with an energy portfolio of any investor-owned utility. I share this background because it informed my professional experience as to what it takes for a state and a regulated entity to prepare for and execute an aggressive energy portfolio standard mandate, including the necessary engineering, financial, and policy changes needed for implementation. The New Mexico Chamber supported the passage of the ETA, one of the most aggressive carbon energy transitions in the country. During those discussions, questions were raised how New Mexico would make such an aggressive transition when we needed to leapfrog in progress on important areas like grid modernization, energy storage, energy efficiency, and distributed generation. For New Mexico to successfully implement the ETA, we must bring both intellectual and financial capital into New Mexico to support this transition. Avangrid was a pressing choice for PNM to partner with, as they will bring a lower cost of capital to investments because of their size and financial resources. That is good for ratepayers. As well, they are a proven leader with years of expertise in the technical areas that will support PNM's and New Mexico's move towards carbon-free electricity generation. As many have already suggested, the deal also brings important investments in the economy. such as the creation of a minority and women-owned business procurement program, which the state of New Mexico currently does not have, and a $15 million investment in economic development programs over the first 3 years of the deal. For New Mexico to grow and diversify our economy, for us to be an attractive place for new investment, it is essential that we can provide reliable and affordable and clean energy for businesses and communities. The proposed merger between PNM and Avangrid provides the best chance for New Mexico to timely achieve its goals of both transitioning to carbon-free electricity generation and growing and diversifying our economy. The New Mexico Chamber asks for your support of these important efforts by supporting the merger between the Public Service Company of New Mexico and Avangrid. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Next is Victor Marshall. You're muted. Okay.
There. My name is Victor Marshall. I represent the Santa Fe New Mexican newspaper in Santa Fe. The New Mexicans submitted written comments on August 3rd, and I hope the commissioners will read them. They have more details. The New Mexican asked the PRC to address two particular problems during the course of these proceedings. Problem number one is that PNM has expressly rejected the First Amendment to the United States Constitution in ongoing litigation with the New Mexican. Let me read you from a brief which PNM filed. These are PNM's words, not mine. Quote, "The constitutional protection against prior restraint of the press does not apply in this situation," close quote. In other words, the press does not have a constitutional right to cover PRC proceedings. This position is so distressing that it has drawn opposition from national news organizations, including the Reporters Committee for Freedom of the Press, the Associated Press, local organizations like the New Mexico Foundation on Open Government, and Searchlight New Mexico. Now, this is a PRC problem, and as public officials, commissioners, of course, have taken an oath to uphold the Constitution, including the First Amendment. Now, how does this relate to this proceeding? Well, the answer is we don't know what Avangrid Iberdrola's position on the First Amendment is. And that's a matter of concern, particularly since Iberdrola operates in many other countries, most of which don't have anything remotely approaching First Amendment freedom of the press. So we are asking the commission, as a condition of this merger, whatever it does or doesn't do, to require a binding commitment from Avangrid to uphold the First Amendment. A public utility that claims the right to censor the press should not be granted a license to operate in New Mexico or in any other state. That's point number one. Point number two is that PNM repeatedly imposes a news blackout on the New Mexican, all other news media, and the public by designating documents as confidential when they aren't. They've used this tactic over and over again during the last 5 years that I've been monitoring the situation. And therefore, the New Mexican is asking the PRC to change the confidentiality rule to provide that when a document is stamped confidential, that confidentiality will expire automatically after 14 days, unless the filer has obtained a specific order from the hearing examiner or the PRC. In other words, there's a 7 or 14-day blackout period during which they can demonstrate that the documents, or at least some of them, are actually confidential. That's an easy rule to rewrite. It needs to be done, and it will make your lives a lot easier. So we would specifically ask the PRC to take action on both of those problems during these proceedings. Now, the latter is a rule change, so that needs to be promulgated so it applies to everyone, not just PNM Avangrid. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Next is Athena Christodoulou.
Hi, this is Athena Christodoulou. This is a vacation and I'm speaking. Anyways,
Honorable, can you hear me? Because I know I've got unstable. Honorable hearing examiner and PRC commissioners. I said hooray first when I thought we had a real giant in the renewable energy industry coming to help us lead the world in climate action. It was a Spanish company. That's okay. Maybe either. Okay, it flitted through my mind that they were trying to make up for conquistadors in the Spanish Inquisition. And Mel Brooks's satirical dance music video danced through my head. I just said I'd dig a little further anyways. You know, sometimes past performance is an indicator of the future, which I and others did dig. Being a woman entrepreneur and retired Navy environmental engineer, I chose to look at two areas in particular, their leadership and technology focus, and here's what I found. They got awards for gender equity. On the International Iberdrola board, there are 6 women and 8 men, which I thought was excellent, but then I dug down to Avangrid, which is their management team is only 2 women and 9 men, which it seemed like it moved backwards and didn't make me feel very good. And then I looked at the awards for environmental awareness and action, and I was on the board of the New Mexico Solar Energy Association. That's where my real interest lies. I myself have 2 EVs, photovoltaics, solar thermal to heat my water, and now mini splits to heat and cool my home. I have let go of fossil fuels. And that last bit of natural gas, letting go of that bit of natural gas was the most difficult part, as I suffered through the winter without my mini splits, but we're okay now. I mention that because PNM is facing the same thing. They've got older engineers and inexperience in renewable energy, and they feel very vulnerable in this last bit of natural gas. But I ask, why not call on the expertise in our own backyard? We've developed the solar thermal tower. And I ask, has Avangrid actually gone a carbon-free? Are they moving in that direction? And recent articles about so-called green hydrogen actually scare the bejeebers out of me. 2 or 3 drops of white paint mixed in with 97 drops of black paint, and you call it white? I don't think so. That's the kind of dent it looks to be. They're calling for green hydrogen in natural gas in the quantity, 2 or 3%. Why do I bring that up? Because their new CEO of Avangrid, Dennis Arriola, is of Southern California gas experience. Yes, he worked for SunPower from 2008 to 2012, but those were the same years that I saw New Mexico Solar Energy Association and other organizations fall under the guise and the fantasy of natural gas being a bridge to renewable energy. It decimated our forward momentum for solar. And then also we fell behind. In addition, to show that this was only a little blip, Dennis went back to gas. That's where he came from, Southern California gas. That natural gas bridge to renewable energy is a bunch of BS. We know that now. And we need to continue with that idea and not let it be even a transition. It's more like the bridge to hell on earth. If we go too slow and do too little, it's so sorry, humanity. Nothing must sidetrack us, slow us, or undercut our trajectory to 100% clean energy. A huge company with the wrong leadership and us with little power spells climate calamity. Saying no to that money is difficult, but we need to look in our own backyard for solutions. Maybe, I don't know, maybe it's time for federally owned transmission and state-owned generation and distribution, but definitely not time for so-called green hydrogen. No more gas, period. Shut it off. So in conclusion, you know more. Is there a way to make sure that they don't use green hydrogen? Is there a way to make sure that we don't have transmission lines going all over our beautiful state in order to power California, Mexico, Colorado, and other states? I don't know. I don't know the solution. I don't think it's this, though. Thank you.
Okay. Next is Melora Palmer.
Good morning. First off, I want to
give my sincere thanks to the New Mexico PRC and to the Honorable Commissioner to allow me to speak on behalf of this, well, on behalf of my thoughts regarding this merger. I am a Albuquerque citizen and rate-paying customer of PNM, and have been rather involved in looking at this merger for the last month or so. And I have some grave concerns as to the merger being in the best interest of New Mexicans. In particular, my concerns center around, it seems to be a classic case of greenwashing, as Ms. Tepelocas just spoke about. The merger agreement requires that PNM abandon its share of the Four Corners coal plant. That will not ensure that this plant is closed, which is in keeping with New Mexico's Energy Transition Act. This act commits our state to transitioning to 80% renewable energies by 2030. And there's nothing to indicate that Avangrid will do that. In fact, what we do know about their current portfolio, they are less than 4% renewable energies. It also does not appear to be any meaningful economic benefits to taxpayers and consumers like myself. From testimony of users in Maine, where Avangrid it merged with the Central Maine Power, they now have the highest, some of the highest electricity rates in the country, and they also now have some of the highest blackout and burnout rates. And there is no agreement in the current merging agreement for a rate freeze. At the same time, PNM stockholders will receive an excess of $200 million just for holding PNM stocks. And PNM senior management will receive a combined $38 million in executive compensation at the time that I, as a consumer, have no guarantee that I will have a rate freeze. And there is evidence to suggest with other mergers they have done in the country that their rates will go up. I do not believe this merger is a winning relationship for New Mexicans. It will mean that our energy system is being controlled by an international energy giant with unlimited resources and zero accountability to our residents and to our land. I would like to see our leaders consider creating a community energy cooperative where we, the citizens of New Mexico, source our energy publicly from our abundant wind and solar energy sources. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Paul Silva.
Yes. Hi. I would like to thank the commissioner for giving me the opportunity to be here today. My name is Paulo Silva. I'm the CEO of Security Limits, Inc. I oppose the merger, and we are preparing a motion to intervene. Avangrid merger with PNM is neither in the best interest of national security nor in the best interest of residents in New Mexico. I worked for 2 years for Avangrid as a chief security architect contractor, hired to provide design and engineering services for a $250–300 million rate case program with the objective to improve the security of critical infrastructure. Security Limits provided essential intellectual property for a next generation secure private cloud data center architecture to protect Avangrid's critical infrastructure and its networks. I have firsthand knowledge about significant procurement corruption, extortion, and coercion tactics within Iberdrola and Avangrid. In fact, I was approached several times to participate in improper bid rigging schemes to benefit companies associated with Avangrid's Spanish owner, Iberdrola. I refused and later reported these solicitations to both companies to no avail. The corruption scheme is very sophisticated. I later discovered that it involves the same individuals who have previously been indicted in Spain for corporate espionage and procurement fraud. They are, but not limited to, Iberdrola Chairman's confidant, ex-Global Head of Security, Antonio Enzejo, Enrique Victorero, ex-Head of International Services, whatever that is, Javier Tabernero, CEO of Prosegur, one of the largest global security companies in the world, a Spanish company, Mr. Chairman's son, Ignacio Sanchez Galan Garcia Tabernero, Director of Global Procurement at Iberdrola. I discovered that Avangrid had wasted my company's work by failing to maintain it properly, thus introducing significant waste and risks to national security. Iberdrola and Avangrid shut me out of later work without explanation, steered maintenance contracts to companies that overcharged and provided kickbacks to Avangrid and Iberdrola procurement personnel. In conclusion, Avangrid lacks oversight. There have been numerous press reports of Iberdrola's corruption investigations. This merger will no doubt spread Avangrid's unethical culture to New Mexico, resulting in wasted ratepayer cash and heightened national security danger as the cancer spreads throughout our country. Ladies and gentlemen, make no mistake, Avangrid US has now become the cash cow for maintaining what resembles the formation of a cabal within the United States of America. Let's not sell our critical infrastructure to a foreign company whose moral compass is as twisted as Enron once was. Finally, I urge the district attorney's office to rescind its tentative merger approval until these allegations are fully investigated and those responsible brought to justice. And one more note, anyone attending these proceedings that has spoken against this merger, I strongly urge you as a cybersecurity professional to rebuild all of your computers, change all your passwords, as I have reason to believe that Avangrid is obtaining lots of information through indirect channels about these proceedings. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next person on the list is Courtney Eichhorst. I don't see that name anywhere here on the Zoom screen. We're in the waiting room. Let's move on to Matthew Suarez.
Yes, good morning, Commissioners. My name is Matthew Suarez. I'm a representative with the Carpenters Union in Mexico. I am a proud 14-year member.
I'm sorry, sir, you're breaking up. I'm sorry, sir, you're breaking up. Can you start again? My name is Matthew Suarez.
Yes, thank you. My name is Matthew Suarez, and I'm a representative of the Carpenters Union here in New Mexico. I am also a proud 14-year member, and I've had the honor of serving my members for the last 9 years, including those in the Four Corners area. We stand in strong support of the merger for local jobs and for training apparatus for the Four Corners members in the state of New Mexico. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next is Kristen Cherrygate.
Yep. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
Okay. Good morning. My name is Kristen Cherrygate, and I am the policy analyst for ICAST, also known as the International Center for Appropriate and Sustainable Technology. I'm going to be providing comments on behalf of ICAST in support of the PNM and Avangrid merger. But before I share our comments, I would like to introduce ICAST first, because our comments are based on who we are and our experience in serving the low-income population in New Mexico and elsewhere across the country. ICAST is a national nonprofit with a mission to provide social, environmental, and economic benefits to low-income populations. ICAST manages energy efficiency programs nationally for various utilities targeting their multifamily affordable housing customers. We also work with utilities on low-income solar programs. Amongst our various utility programs, ICAST has also managed and currently manages the energy efficiency program for multifamily affordable housing in Washington, D.C., which is a direct result of the PEPCO and Exelon merger, and thus similar to this discussion on the PNM and Avangrid merger. This year alone, ICAST will successfully provide green upgrade solutions to over 25,000 low to moderate income households. And as such, we are very familiar with not only what our low to moderate income customers desire, but also how utilities operate. ICAST has been operating in New Mexico specifically since 2006, when it completed its first project of the Pueblo of Jemez. Since 2014, ICAST has provided green upgrades to low to moderate income families in New Mexico by managing the multifamily weatherization program for the state of New Mexico. And since 2016, ICAST has also managed the energy efficiency program for the New Mexico Gas Company. We currently serve about 3,500 low to moderate income households each year in New Mexico. And so our comments, we believe, represent these families we serve and are based on our experience within the local communities that will directly benefit from this merger. From our specific experience, ICAST personally sees no legitimate downside to the merger. Instead, there are countless upsides from the negotiated settlement that will greatly benefit low to moderate income families in the state. A merged entity will produce greater volume efficiencies in everything it does, which will include more buying power in the energy markets and thus will have an impact in keeping energy costs down for all New Mexicans. Currently, PNM has very little focus on low-income programs, and the merger offers a lot more for this underserved population. We all know PNM, but Avangrid is the unknown, and rather than fear the unknown, ICAST wishes to be optimistic rather than pessimistic on the future. And thus, we would rather a decision on the merger be based on the enhanced opportunities for disadvantaged communities in the state of New Mexico, rather than the issues brought up that are merely potential. Thus, ICAST would like to highlight the following opportunities the merger has promised, opportunities that we believe will ensure accessibility and equity being focal points for New Mexico's energy sector. Some of these include the $6 million in relief for customers who've been unable to pay their bills, $15 million in low-income energy efficiency, $2 million in interconnection assistance for low-income customers in remote service areas, $12.5 million to Indigenous community groups in the Four Corners region, the development of at least 200 megawatts of renewable energy on the Navajo Nation, and the commitment to an effective minority and woman-owned business procurement program in the state. ICAST is grateful to have had the opportunity to speak to you today, and we thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you. Is Sophia Galkin on the call? Don't see her. And I don't see Michael Herrera.
Not yet.
Okay. All right. Well, we've been going about an hour and a half, and I think our court reporter and some of the rest of us could use a break right now. Let's take a 10-minute break and come back at 25 till 11. And for people listening in on YouTube, whoever's in Group D should probably try and connect in at this time and into the waiting room, and we'll start to admit you into the Zoom call to be continued at 10:35. Okay, we're going to be off the record till 10:35. Thank you.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, is this public comment time?
Not yet. We're in recess until about 2 minutes from now.
Oh, I see. Does that mean I'll be coming on in about 2 minutes?
They're going to call on each of us by name, and then
I
you'll
see.
unmute and give your testimony.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we're ready to get started again. David, are you ready?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. First of all, I want to thank everyone who's participated so far. Everyone seems prepared. Generally speaking, slowly enough for us to capture what you're saying, and everyone's been respectful, and everyone seems to be patient. So thank you. Let's continue. I'm looking at my sheet, and I'm looking at people who are signing in. I don't see anyone that we've missed so far. So let's go ahead with Group D. Is Steve Chavira here? I saw him earlier in the day, but I don't see him now. Okay, how about Paul?
Paul Sauter.
Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Paul Sauter. I'm a resident of Albuquerque, and I moved here from Maine in 2011. I'm a scientist and an entrepreneur, and I'm on the board of Indivisible Nob Hill. After I left Maine, Avangrid merged with Central Maine Power. Following that acquisition, Avangrid attained a very poor record in serving ratepayers in Maine. Avangrid's record as an unreliable electric utility in Maine should be enough for the PRC to decide that the merger is not in the public interest of the people of New Mexico. Avangrid cannot be expected to be beneficial to utility customers here. However, as others have already pointed out, there are other reasons why the proposed Avangrid merger is not in the public interest. First, there are more than a dozen accusations of fraud, bribery, and harassment against top management at Avangrid Iberdrola currently being investigated by the Spanish High Court. Second, Avangrid used its money and political influence to kill a pro-rooftop solar bill and a community-owned power bill supported by 75% of the people in Maine. They cannot be expected to support renewable energy here in New Mexico. Third, during the discovery process, the hearing examiner was forced to suspend all hearings and order Avangrid Iberdrola to disclose penalties, violations, and enforcement actions that they had failed to disclose. Avangrid produced over 2,500 pages of documentation detailing more than 200 violations at 8 subsidiaries and upward of $60 million in fines. In summary, it should be clear from the points that I've presented, as well as from the comments of other people this morning, that the PNM Avangrid merger is not in the public interest. The PRC is charged with evaluating whether this merger is in the public interest, and I ask you to give our concerns full consideration. New Mexico is singularly gifted with abundant resources for power generation using wind and solar. New Mexico is also a national leader in science and technology. I'm sure that we can find a solution to New Mexico's transition to clean energy that does not involve the counterproductive Avangrid merger. Thank you for this opportunity to speak and for your service to the citizens of New Mexico.
Okay, thank you. Next is Troy Kuchera.
Hello, I am Troy Kuchera. I administer the Weatherization Assistance Program in New Mexico for Mortgage Finance Authority, also known as MFA. MFA is a quasi-governmental entity that was created by the state legislature in 1975 to provide financing for housing and other related services for low and moderate income New Mexicans. With a staff of just over 100, the organization serves approximately 18,000 New Mexico families each year. MFA relies on more than 200 partner organizations to deliver its programs and services to the people of New Mexico. If this merger is to take place, please consider the following. The 2019 U.S. Census Committee survey estimates there are over 174,000 family households in New Mexico with incomes at or below the 200% poverty level. This represents 22% of all New Mexico households. Low-income households carry a larger burden for energy costs, typically spending 13.9% of total annual income on energy versus 3% for other households. Energy efficiency retrofits and weatherization reduces this disparity. For every dollar invested in energy efficiency for low-income households, there is $1.72 generated in energy-related benefits. Households that receive complete and full energy efficiency retrofits save an average of $230 annually on utility expenses, allowing these households to pay their utility bills more easily. If this merger were to go forward, we would like to ensure stipulations are present that contain benefits to low and moderate income households in New Mexico and specifically include funds that support energy efficiency services to be provided to these households. It is our hope that these comments I have made here today will be considered if this merger were to take place. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Nadia Sykes is next, but I don't see her. Okay, let's move on to Joey Atencio.
Yes, sir.
Go ahead.
My name is Joey Atencio. I'm the business manager for Labor's Local 16. I grew up and was raised in San Juan County, and I stand in strong support of this merger, and I encourage you guys to support it. On behalf of myself, my family that still lives in the Four Corners area, and my members up there. I have roughly 400 members that work out at the power plants up there, and we stand strong in support of this merger. Thank you, sir, for your service. Have a good day.
Okay, thank you. Next is Ralph Arianes.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good morning. My name is Ralph Arianes. I'm the chairman of the Hispano Roundtable of New Mexico. The Hispano Roundtable of New Mexico is a coalition of over 50 Hispano organizations and over 50,000 members statewide. Our mission is to seek the advancement of education, employment, economic development, environmental justice, civil rights, and social justice for Hispanic Americans. Our coalition is made up of organizations at the local, state, and national levels. Hispano Roundtable of New Mexico is by far the leading voice for Hispanic Americans across New Mexico, and we have very strongly advocated advocacy relations with our Native American brothers and sisters across the country. We support this merger 100%. This merger will bring hundreds of good paying jobs to New Mexico, which we badly need. They will provide millions of dollars in rate credits to New Mexicans, and we are often rated the poorest state in the country. We need these jobs now. They will make over $15 million in economic development projects in New Mexico. PNM's board of directors will be comprised entirely of New Mexico residents, of which at least 40% will be independent voices. Joint applicants will work with the New Mexico Attorney General to initiate an effective minority and women-owned business procurement program within 6 months following closing. This is unheard of in New Mexico. Avangrid affiliates will work with the Navajo Nation to develop on Navajo Nation land within 2 years of closing one or more renewable energy and or energy storage projects of no less than 200 megawatts. Joint applicants will work with the New Mexico Attorney General and other stakeholders to implement a new program within 6 months of closing to increase diversity on the PNM management team. Joint applicants will work with the city of Albuquerque to provide parking, street lighting, and to complete construction of a substation in southeast Albuquerque to enhance electric service to the Albuquerque International Sunport, residences, businesses, and projected private development in this area of the city. Much needed. The median income for a full-time working Hispanic in New Mexico is just over $16,000 per year. Our median income level is below the state and national poverty level. This is a disgrace. Most importantly, Avangrid is bringing clean and leading-edge energy technology to New Mexico. We want this merger to take place as soon as possible, as our responder community needs these jobs and these economic development projects right now. We support this merger. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Is Jeff Selesky there? I don't see him. Okay, let's move on to Barry Dixon. Don't see him either. Charlie Ivy. You're muted, Mr. Ivy. Can you unmute yourself? There's a little blue square at the top right of your screen.
Okay.
Okay, there you go.
Sorry about
Go
that.
ahead.
I'm a novice. So my name's Charlie Ivy. I'm a native of New Mexico and a lifelong customer of PNM. I live in Albuquerque. And I want to thank the commission for this opportunity to comment. If the acquisition of PNM by Avangrid is approved, it will create a relationship that is too big to fail. This will be very dangerous for New Mexico ratepayers. Many powerful people who support the deal will have reputational and possibly financial interests in assuring that any failings of Avangrid are glossed over or ignored. The primary interest of Avangrid will be to deliver value to its shareholders, even if it comes at the expense of the people of New Mexico. Providing dependable, affordable service and growing the renewable power reputation of the state of New Mexico will be secondary at best. New Mexico has already demonstrated our inability to hold oil and gas industries accountable for their failures to follow our environmental regulations because they represent such a large component of our economy. How will we then be able to hold Avangrid accountable for service failures, predatory pricing, or environmental damage, especially when they have already demonstrated a willingness to ignore demands for transparency? I encourage you to slow this process down and at the same time thoroughly investigate the alternative of establishing a public utility owned by the people of New Mexico before we create this too big to fail relationship. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I see a few names here now that we've passed because the people were not available, but they are available now. So Courtney Eichhorst, are you ready?
Yes, sir, I am.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, thank you, Commission. I am so sorry I was caught up on the dealing with something else earlier. This has great importance to us, and I'm sorry that I was unavailable when you first called my name. My name is Courtney Eichhorst. I am the business manager for the Plumbers and Pipe Fitters Local 412 in New Mexico. and president for New Mexico Building and Construction Trades Council. The council voted unanimously to support this. And we think it's a great opportunity for New Mexico. We think it could bring in additional jobs, additional revenue, and additional economic opportunities in the state. So we do support this, and we think the merger is something that we're excited about. And I'll yield my time right there. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you. Let's go to Stephen Shavira.
Good morning. Can you hear me okay, sir?
Yes.
Thank you so much, Mr. Hearing Commissioner, commissioners of the PRC, and everybody else listening on this call. Thank you for this opportunity to speak today about the merger of PNM and Avangrid. I am the executive officer of the Silver City Grant County Chamber of Commerce. I lead business development and economic development efforts across Grant County in Southwest New Mexico. And our board of directors has recently voted unanimously to fully support the proposed merger with Public Service Company of New Mexico and Avangrid. We recognize the potential benefit to New Mexico and New Mexicans as a result of this merger, and it is our desire today to publicly state our support for it. The promise of nearly $73 million, which will benefit ratepayers in the form of savings and significant aid to arrearages, which were caused by the pandemic from which we are still trying to free ourselves, will make a huge difference in our economy and with our citizens. We look forward to the benefit that our rural communities will recognize after seeing improvements to our statewide power grid. Rural New Mexico, and let's face it, we are all rural, has been overlooked for far too long. The merger promises high-paying jobs, and 150 new jobs over the next 3 years is a huge step in the right direction. And given where we've been over the past 18 months, we need all the positivity that we can get. We look favorably at the commitment by Avangrid to commit at least $15 million to economic development projects and programs, small and local businesses, and to local workforce initiatives. We wholeheartedly welcome Avangrid to our marketplace, and we view this merger as a win-win-win for New Mexico and New Mexicans. I urge everyone on the PRC board and everyone listening to this call to consider positively this merger and stand in support with the Silver City Grant County Chamber of Commerce. Mr. Hearing Examiner, back to you.
Okay, well, thank you. Let's go to Nadia Sykes.
Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Nadia Sykes. I'm a city commissioner in Alamogordo, New Mexico, but I'd like to emphasize that I am speaking simply for me. I've been unable at this point to get my colleagues to learn much about this Avangrid merger. But from everything I've seen, from everything that I've read, I believe that Avangrid as a company, even though I've heard comments to the contrary, I do believe that they're very progressive, that they're interested in renewables, that they're espousing all of the things that we seem to talk about as being progressive for the state of New Mexico. I am in full support of this. I would like to see this merger happen. I appreciate the fact that Avangrid has demonstrated or shown us, told us that they're going to be providing 150 full-time jobs. I think that that's an extremely positive thing. But I like the idea of their solar direct projects that they've talked about in their advertising, that PNM has spoken about as well. So I just wanted to express my full support for this, and I appreciate the time this morning, and it's good to see everybody, so thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right. Well, I guess what we need to do now is encourage everyone else who has signed up to try and get into the Zoom waiting room, and we'll take their comments. And I noticed that a few people in these later groups have already signed in, And I see one here, Tiffany Stevens. Go ahead, Ms. Stevens.
Hi, thank you for having me. I represent the economically challenged workers of New Mexico who cannot be here today because they're working and their voices are not heard here. So I would like to represent them and speak against this merger. This merger will have an impact on our outages as we see what's happened in Maine and also in Texas. Avangrid has blackouts in Maine, and as a low-income worker of New Mexico, we as a family cannot afford to have blackouts when we have children in school. We need to be at work, we need to have our lights on, and we need to have food in the refrigerator. So I'm against the history of what Avangard has done in Maine, and I don't want to see that happen in New Mexico. So please think about our economically challenged New Mexicans who are not going to be getting one of those 150 jobs that I hear talked about today. We will not be having an opportunity to have our voices heard here. So thank you for having me. I'm against this merger.
Okay, thank you. Let's go to Sarah Walker.
Yes, hi. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for letting me speak. I have a rather personal take on this. I am shocked that this merger is happening. That something so important to local control is going to be in the hands of a large foreign monopoly with a proven bad track record. I am dependent on my oxygen concentrator and on several medical equipment that runs with electricity. I am aware of the track record of Avangrid in Maine, where they've become #1 in outages with the most frequent, and second in the country with the longest outages in the country. I have felt so lucky not to have experienced outages in the 20 years living in New Mexico. I have been very pleased with PNM service, rapid service, and I've also been pleased with their rates. And I am living on a fixed income. I'm a retired pediatric dietitian. New Mexico, I think, is too poor to afford a disastrous mistake like this. I feel like I'm a David against Goliath for this. It looks like a lot of money is in this a lot of money is going to be made by a few people. Nothing is clear about this deal except pie in the sky promises. What is clear is that the management of Avangrid has a bad reputation, and I'm really at a loss as how an unethical company like this is being allowed to take control in New Mexico, and our beautiful state and our beautiful environment is possibly going to be very detrimental to that. Thank you. That's all I have to say.
All right, thank you. Next is Greg Sonnenfeld.
Hello. I'm Greg Sonnenfeld, an engineer and community advocate, and I'm here to speak on behalf of myself and 350 Santa Fe. We oppose the Avangrid merger. This merger brings significant disadvantage to our climate and to our ratepayers. Some claim that Avangrid brings expertise in renewables, but Avangrid utilities have ranked among the least reliable in the nation. For example, in 2019, Avangrid's Central Maine Power had an incredulous 17 hours of outages, 8 times more failure than a typically publicly run utility. They suffer twice as many outages as well. Their JD Power customer satisfaction score, 634, is the lowest in the nation. They are 50 points below the 5 other lowest ranking utilities. So Avangrid does not demonstrate renewable expertise. They demonstrate failure to run a reliable grid. The Four Corners coal plant The Energy Transition Act intended to shut this down, eliminating CO2 emissions beyond 2030. This was a key compromise in the ETA. Any stipulation that allows Four Corners to continue operating must be rejected. Ethics. Every week brings a new revelation of impropriety. A $450,000 fine for liability lapses, $10 million for billing mismanagement, $360,000 for test violations. Not 3 months ago, another $2 million, $25 million in fines, the majority levied during the merger, most undisclosed until the hearing examiner's order. A fraud investigation of Iberdrola, and now the law firm representing the Attorney General was just disqualified for an ethical breach involving working for Iberdrola. So this doesn't demonstrate commitment to serve ethically or reliably. So if PNM can't continue ownership, we should create a public utility. This is a proven business model with high customer satisfaction. Utilization of public lands can benefit schools. Public transmission infrastructure can allow open competition for generation. If PNM can continue without a merger, I'm sure the PRC can approve the hiring of an engineering management team to assist in their renewable transition. If a merger is necessary, it would be best if PNM brought a different company to the table. Dissatisfied consumers do not have the option to change their utility. All issues brought up must be fixed, and the commission should mandate public members on the merged boards. Public concerns could then be voiced, reducing the need for challenges in regulatory proceedings. New Mexico shares in the most valuable renewable resources in our nation. We must be the best possible stewards of our economy and our climate, and we should consider alternatives. Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you. Paul Yoder is next. I don't see him. Mike Melendez. I see you're on the screen. I don't hear you. Mr. Melendez? Your audio doesn't seem to be working. Okay, we'll come back to you. Abbas Akil?
Yes, Mr. Examiner, I'm here.
Go ahead.
I want to thank the commissioners for allowing me time to speak. Thank you very much for that. I support the PNM proposed merger between PNM and Avangrid, mainly for a couple of reasons, and I'm only going to enumerate two. You've heard quite a few for and against. As you know, Avangrid and Iberdrola have proven experience in renewables. That being said, and as an international company with existing generation assets in the US, Avangrid brings technical and financial resources which will benefit PNM ratepayers and possibly the state. That being said, my concern is more about how the PRC will oversee this merger to protect the best interests of the ratepayers. I think what I would like to do is have the PRC ask what Avangrid sees in PNM and in New Mexico. Is it only because we offer the best wind and solar resources? Is it because New Mexico sits and some of PNM territory sits on the easternmost boundary of the WECC? These are important questions to ask, and these are the strategic reasons why we need to explore why Avangrid needs to come to merge with PNM. I also asked the PRC to ask what Avangrid will do in some of these other issues. What path does Avangrid offer to achieve the goals of the Energy Transition Act, which is better and less natural gas dependent than PNM has proposed so far? The other points that I'd also like to raise is, does Avangrid have plans to deploy long duration energy storage to better utilize our wind and solar resources? we, as you know, we do not have any energy storage resources in the state. So what does Avangrid plan to do to address that? Our state has many rural communities, and some of those are on tribal lands served by PNM. What measures will Avangrid take to enhance the resiliency of these rural service areas as climate change takes place and these communities go through some drastic changes? I've heard, and we know that Avangrid offered to develop solar and storage resources on Navajo lands, but is that the best use of energy storage in a centralized location? Is that the best operational solution, or is there a better way to offer energy storage in that area, or is this just merely a token offering to a tribal entity? What plan does Avangrid have to modernize the PNM grid? Will they deploy smart substations and smart meters to the ratepayers? What steps will Avangrid take to deploy more rooftop solar and residential energy storage to serve as an active resource of the grid? Honorable Commissioners, the bottom line is that if it is not Avangrid today, it may be another larger conglomerate wooing PNM tomorrow. So I think the onus resides on us to make sure that the best interests of PNM and the ratepayers is protected. In this regard, I think the proposed merger, because of Avangrid is a multinational company, is not to be feared. There'll be other multinational companies that will come as suitors to PNM. So the burden really lies on us to make sure that we do the due diligence to make sure that the merger works in the best interest of the ratepayers. Thank you, Honorable Commissioners. Thank you for allowing me to give you these comments.
Thank you. Next is Chris McDaniel.
Hello, my name is Chris McDaniel. I am a small business owner in New Mexico here. We have heard from many companies and many councils today. I am talking to you as a ratepayer and as a citizen, and I would like to be on the record as standing against this merger. PNM has made many commitments to us through the ETA. This PNM knows that they cannot fund these commitments through rate increases because that would go through the PRC itself. They know that they will not fund these commitments themselves because that would affect their bottom line and their stockholders. They've had decades to do this and to do the improvements to the infrastructure that's needed here. They have chosen not to do this. This is their way of getting around it by using Avangrid. They looked elsewhere for this. Avangrid sees New Mexico as another market that they can manipulate, as others have alluded here to today. New Mexico's clean energy commitments are for state utilities, like others have stated. We fear that Avangrid will abuse their multinational, multi-state setup to bypass laws and oversight. Also, their ability to sell off toxic assets to markets that are not under the authority of the ETA or the PRC is very concerning. The ETA is far from perfect, but at least it was a start. We have heard others say that ratepayers will pay less today. This is not true. There is in the ETA language that allows them to charge more for renewables, the optional green power tariff and others like that. Like I said, the ETA is not perfect, but it is a good start. I think we should move forward, holding PNM to their commitments and not allowing them to use Avangrid as a way to bypass them. That's what I have to say. I'm against this merger. Thank you. Have a good day.
Okay, thank you. Next is Martin Suazo. Don't see him in the screen or the waiting room. Lee Gamelski.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Good. My name is Lee Gamelski. I am an Albuquerque resident. I am an architect practicing. Thank you, Mr. Hearing Examiner and New Mexico PRC Commissioners, to allow me to participate in this hearing today. As stated in my previous email to the PRC, I oppose the Avangrid purchase merger of PNM. As we have heard today, and as New Energy Economy has detailed, there are many issues concerning Avangrid's and parent company Iberdrola's business practices that should stop this purchase. In lieu of repeating those issues and concerns, I would like to expand upon my recommendation that the PRC should oppose this purchase merger, and the PRC should recommend to the governor and the state legislature that we create a public electric utility owned by the citizens of New Mexico as either a nonprofit corporation or as a quasi-governmental agency similar to the Albuquerque-Bernalillo County Water Utility Authority. As PRC Commissioner Fishman stated at the beginning of today's hearing, the role of the PRC is to serve the public interest. Thank you, Commissioner. As a public-owned utility would focus on the needs of New Mexicans and not on Wall Street shareholders' profits. We can shorten the timeline to create a 100% all renewable energy producing electric utility from the time frame that is in the Energy Transition Act and that proposed by Avangrid. The funding for the purchase of PNM needs to be worked out. There are several options. Money from the state's $22 billion plus permanent funds can be loaned for the purchase to a new nonprofit or to a new quasi-government agency, or those funds can be used for direct purchase of PNM. And there are other legislative funding opportunities as well. What's important here is that we have a phenomenal opportunity for New Mexicans to create a true public utility. We can be the world's leaders in renewable energy production. This will attract new clean-minded industry to our state. We can help fight climate change and global warming. We will create a more stable and more dependable source of electricity for New Mexicans, and it will be produced at less cost to New Mexicans. And we will also be moving away from fossil fuels polluting our environment. Thank you, commissioners. Thank you, hearing examiner, to let me speak and address our concerns and the concept for a publicly owned electric utility. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Paul Gibson. Mr. Gibson, you're muted. There you go.
Good morning, commissioners, hearing examiner, and fellow attendees. My name is Paul Gibson, co-founder of Retake Our Democracy, a statewide advocacy organization with 2,500 supporters. Avangrid ads and promises related to jobs and other promises of economic investment are just promises. We feel past performance is a better indicator of future performance than ads and promises. So let's begin by looking at Avangrid's reliability of service delivery. Avangrid Iberdrola merged with Central Maine Power in 2005, and based on data from 2015 to 2019, Maine saw the highest average number of power outages of any state in the nation at nearly 4 per year. Maine also had the second longest average annual downtime in the country, just behind hurricane-battered Florida. If reliability of service has not been a priority in Maine, will it be one in New Mexico? Now let's look at customer satisfaction. Before Iberdrola Avangrid purchased Central Maine Power, CMP had among the highest customer satisfaction rating in the nation. But in just a few years, customer satisfaction plummeted. According to JD Power and Associates, CMP ranked last among all mid-sized and large electric utilities for customer satisfaction in the years of 2018, 19, and 20. Would they do any better in New Mexico? We can answer that question by examining corporate behavior in Maine, Spain, and South America. Iberdrola corporate leadership is under investigation in Spain for fraud, bribery, misuse of funds, and corruption. While the charges are certainly cause for alarm, we have hard evidence that is also informs us about their corporate culture. On the page, sorry. Quite a lot can be found. Avangrid sent shutoff notices to hundreds of customers in the dead of Maine's winter during a pandemic and in violation of state law. Avangrid hired private investigators in Maine to follow petition gatherers who were collecting petitions opposing a proposed Avangrid transmission line through the Maine forest. And to make way for wind farms, hydroelectric dams, and transmission lines in Brazil, Iberdrola forced the relocation of 50,000 indigenous people from their ancestral homeland. With this track record, the charges in Spain seem highly credible. Is this who we want to be negotiating with to help us meet our renewable energy goals? I feel we can do this on our own by creating our own public power utility. Do we want to partner with Iberdrola in negotiating how to export our renewable energy? I think not. What's more, the deal they promise is bereft of any thought to benefit to ratepayers or the state of New Mexico. From the conclusion of merger expert Scott Hempling's testimony, he states, quote, Iberdrola Avangrid wants to control PNM to get a platform. PNMR wants to sell control of PNM's public franchise to get $713 million for shareholders. Nothing about this transaction benefits consumers. Much about it can harm them. There are no reasons to approve this transaction and many reasons to reject it, end quote. Based upon all the evidence presented just now, I ask that the PRC reject this proposal entirely. And thank you so much for your service and for this opportunity to speak.
Okay, thank you. Before we go on to the next group, I want to give Michael Melendez another chance here. Are you able to fix your audio? It doesn't sound like it. Okay. Well, let's go on then to Carl Peterson. And Mr. Peterson, you're muted.
Hold on. Can you hear me
there
now?
you go. Yes.
Excellent. Thank you, commissioners, for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Carl Peterson, and I am a PNM ratepayer living in New Mexico and a member of the indivisible Nob Hill. I'd like to make 3 points today. First, Avangrid's experience with Central Maine Power should be enough.
I'm sorry, sir. Could you slow down, please?
I can speak much slower. First, Avangrid's experience with Central Maine Power should be enough to disqualify Avangrid from the acquisition of PNM. Their customer service is abysmal. The reliability of their network is disgusting, going from one of the best in the nation to one of the worst after the Avangrid acquisition. And their rate structure is one of the highest in the US. But this deal is not about renewables, jobs, power company performance, charity work contributions, or the environment. It's about debt. And this is my second point. PNM has known for the last 20 years the value of their company is in the transmission lines, and they have failed to invest in renewable generation. Instead, they have invested 80% of their power portfolio in the two most expensive forms of power in the United States today, nuclear and coal. Recently, PNM was told by the NM Supreme Court that this strategy was found to be imprudent. This placed PNM management in the difficult position of having to recognize the imprudence of their historic investment strategy and a potential loss of shareholder value, as well as personal PNM equity that they might hold. PNM needed to find a buyer for their only viable asset, the transmission network. Thus, enter Avangrid, a company which is offering to pay $8.3 billion for PNM, a company capitalized at only $4.15 billion. That means that $4.15 billion goes to the shareholders plus an incentive payment Avangrid will make of 10% on the value of the stock. This means that, roughly speaking, Avangrid is going to get cash back on this deal of $3.6 billion in the form of a loan. They are using the good faith and credit of New Mexico to finance this loan. Avangrid is capitalized at 16.8 billion, but their enterprise value is 25.7. And let's look at the majority owner of Avangrid, Iberdrola. They're capitalized at 76 billion, but their enterprise value is 151 billion. Most of that debt has been created since 2019. The sole purpose of this deal is the creation of collateralized debt. This is a replay of the economic disaster of 2008, but instead of houses, it's connected to electrical power transmission. And the ratepayers of New Mexico are going to be on the hook for its repayment at some point in the future. Ask yourself what happens when the interest rates rise and Iberdrola is faced with being unable to service this debt. Who will pay the enormous debt that Iberdrola has acquired? So my third point is that the PRC needs to be able to answer 4 questions. Who owns Avangrid? Iberdrola admits to only owning 81.5%. How would Iberdrola debt be controlled by the PRC without local control? Who in New Mexico has been paid by Iberdrola or their agents? And last, and possibly the most interesting, how much of Iberdrola debt in the past has been directly converted to renewable generation hardware? Lenin said, there comes a time that the capitalists will vie with each other for the rope contract. Replace capitalists with New Mexico rate players, and you will understand where this deal is going. Thank you very much, commissioners.
Okay, thank you. Next is Rebecca Yasso Aguilar.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you this morning. My name is Rebecca Yasso Aguilar. I am a resident of Albuquerque and a PNM customer. I am here today to speak against the merger of PNM with Avangrid Iberdrola. I have a PhD in sociology, and as part of my research, I have studied privatization processes in Latin America. This is how I came to know the ways in which Iberdrola penetrated Latin American markets and its disastrous consequences for consumers. Iberdrola's bad reputation does not stem only from its performance in Maine. The company has an international reputation of inappropriate, unethical behavior and mistreatment of customers in pursuit of greedy profits. The conflict of interest exposed in Iberdrola's case in New Mexico is a modus operandi of this company throughout the world. In Mexico, the company cultivated close relations with President Felipe Calderón and his Secretary of Energy in order to obtain advantageous contracts that otherwise they would have not been able to obtain. The conflict of interest was exposed when it was revealed that both ex-President Calderón and the ex-Secretary of Energy were later employed by Iberdrola in a shameless example of revolving door. Iberdrola was expelled from Guatemala in 2008 and from Bolivia in 2012. In both cases, the reasons were the same: poor quality of the electrical supply, making the rates more expensive, and not guaranteeing access to the most disadvantaged sectors of the population. In Brazil, Iberdrola controls more than 70% of the electrical energy in the country. Since the arrival of this company and the privatization of electrical energy, the rate of electricity in Brazil has increased by almost 400%, which has made it the 5th country in the world with the most expensive electricity. Furthermore, in the projects in which Iberdrola has been involved in Brazil, its subsidiaries have been accused of bribing the police and carrying out acts of violence against the populations that oppose those projects. Latin America is the most profitable region for Iberdrola. Although it accounts for less than 10% of the corporation's costs, it provides almost 25% of the total profit. I assure you that this has not been achieved by providing the best service and the most fair treatment to Latin American consumers. We would not want New Mexicans to be subjected to these practices. Finally, for all the talk about the high ethical standards of Avangrid Iberdrola that we have heard today from supporters of the merger, let us not forget that as we speak, there is a criminal investigation in Spain that is looking into potential criminal activities connected to Iberdrola. I respectfully urge this commission to abandon this merger. Consider instead the possibility of a public company owned by the people of New Mexico. Thank you very much, commissioners, for the opportunity to speak to you today.
Thank you. Next is Wendy Gray Eyes.
Hi there. My name is Wendy Gray Eyes, and I am a member of the Navajo Nation, but I'm also an assistant professor here at University of New Mexico and a resident of Albuquerque. I'm also a PNM customer. What I care about what's happening here in our community, the here and now, and I believe it is critical to ensure that we create a renewable energy that we believe that will work in favor for our precious New Mexico environment and for our people in this state. I recognize as a daughter of a coal miner the challenges of decreasing our dependency upon non-renewable energy. Just today, the United Nations released a report stating that portions of the climate change are now irreversible. So I care for the environment, and we need actions that push for a sustainable energy future that rescues what we have remaining of our precious earth, our air, our water resources, and particularly to provide resources to the people.
Can
I also
ask you to
support
slow
this
down?
merger because it's
Can I ask you to slow down, please?
Yes.
Okay.
Oh, my apologies. I support this merger because it promises to create a better future for New Mexico, which includes supporting minority and women-owned businesses. In particular, the support for the Navajo Nation will be very beneficial for our communities and our neighbors. And also establishing a carbon reduction task force immediately. I think that would work for the benefit of the New Mexicans, particularly with the goal of reducing our carbon dependency by 2040. I thank you so much for listening to my public comments today. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next is Omar Talamontes.
Hello, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
My name is Omar Talamontes, and I grew up in the South Valley in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And I work for the Carpenters Local 1319 as a carpenter, and I've been there for 12 years. And I strongly stand in support of the merger. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Juan Gonzalez. Don't see him. Carlos Diaz.
Good morning.
Can't hear you you're breaking up.
Can you guys hear me?
Wish I could say we can. Try one more time.
My name is Carlos Diaz, Local 1319 here in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I've been a member for 16 years. Okay.
That's good. Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
And I am in support of the merger.
Did you have anything else to add? Okay. All right. Well, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Diaz. Next is Daniel Pritchard.
Good morning, Honorable Hearing Examiner and Commissioners. I am a member of the Executive Board of Renewable Taos, an all-volunteer organization dedicated to 100% renewable energy and economic development all across northern New Mexico, including Farmington. I'm not a paid staffer of any organization. I am a retired electrical engineer who understands solar and wind generation, transmission, and electrical battery storage. I was a customer of PNM for over 40 years. Now I'm a member of a local electrical cooperative. So why is Iberdrola and Avangrid working so hard to suppress information that should be public? And if this acquisition was such a wonderful thing, why are they having to spend so much money on glitzy TV ads to try to convince us? Their misleading propaganda is not appreciated. Why is there not a full renewable energy and energy storage plan for the PNM service area as part of their promotion? This is what we need, not deception and withheld information. At a deeper level, why is it okay with other organizations that New Mexico continues to be a resource extraction zone with all the profits leaving the state, thus leaving us at the bottom of the list in everything from wages to opportunity to childhood hunger and education? This acquisition is exactly what we do not need. Once again, profits made from New Mexico resources flowing out of New Mexico, just like what has happened with gas and oil. Where is the real profit realized from all of New Mexico's oil and gas reserves? It's not in New Mexico. How about a better alternative than this acquisition? Well, let's get creative. You may know that the State Investment Council manages about $32 billion in assets. And by statute, returns on this portfolio are targeted at about 7%. That's really good. Why not convert PNM into a public utility and return the excessive and gratuitous 10% stock dividends to the citizens of New Mexico? It's been done before with great success. Who would be against that? This is absolutely the time to keep looking for ways to benefit New Mexico. However, selling out the $4 billion PNM to a foreign-owned company for twice what it's worth is not in the best interest of the residents of New Mexico. Let's keep public benefit in public regulation. Let's put public back in PNM. I am against this acquisition for the good of the people of New Mexico. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I skipped Jim McKenzie. I guess I didn't see his face here, but he's here now. Go ahead, Mr. McKenzie.
You're on mute, sir.
Okay.
I'll start again.
Good morning. Greetings, commissioners and honorable hearing officer, and thank you for this opportunity to make comments on this important case. Special greetings to my commissioner, Commissioner Hall. My name is Jim McKenzie. I'm a resident of Albuquerque, a PNM customer for 50 years, a retired member of the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, and I have been a principal in 2 distributed generating companies, and in that capacity have been involved in PRC regulatory affairs for 20 years. I'm also an energy activist. I support the merger of PNM and Avangrid for one very important yet simple reason. Avangrid has committed to transitioning to 100% renewable power in New Mexico by 2035. That's 10 years sooner than the statutory requirements of the ETA. The reduction of greenhouse emissions from power generation is of primary importance. For me, this trumps all other issues here. Avangrid has the experience to make this happen. Much has been made of numerous other issues than the carbon footprint of the merged companies. Listening to many comments of those opposed to the merger, it is sometimes hard to tell that the new company will be regulated by the PRC and that state law will govern the new company. Problems with Avangrid utilities in other regions may speak more to those poor regulatory environments than anything else. In conclusion, my support for this merger speaks to my continued faith in the ability of our PRC to effectively regulate power generation for the benefit of all ratepayers. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'm going back into some names that of people who were not available originally. I see Jeffrey Selesky is there.
Thank you. Everybody hear me?
Yes.
Oh, great. That was great. I finally got the link here. There are numerous things wrong with the proposed PNM Avangrid merger that make it difficult to know where to begin, although there's been a lot of great comments and beginnings. I've appreciated hearing many of them this morning. I wanted to highlight two things. First, the 88-page expert testimony provided to the PRC in April by Mr. Scott Hempling, an attorney specializing in utility regulation and mergers. Mr. Hempling's fundamental conclusion in this detailed study addresses the motivation of the two parties. Iberdrola Avangrid wants to control PNM to create a platform for the purpose of launching energy sales to larger and more lucrative markets, both west in Arizona and California, as well as south into Mexico. While Avangrid has touted their capabilities to bring clean, renewable energy to New Mexico, historically worldwide, over 60% of their energy sources have been fossil-based, while about 20% have been nuclear, a total of over 80% of their entire portfolio. Why? Because these energy sources are where the big profit margins are. Avangrid will help develop New Mexico's vast solar and wind resources. However, their history has been to discourage and even force out local community solar energy initiatives that best serve public interest. On the other side of the equation, PNMR wants to sell control of PNM's public franchise to receive $713 million, a sweet windfall for its shareholders. Second point, nothing about this transaction benefits consumers. Much about the transaction will harm ratepayers, especially as a condition of the merger. The required sale of the Four Corners power plant, the PNM plans to charge ratepayers $300 million to help facilitate as an abatement demand. This would be entirely illegal burden on ratepayers since the New Mexico Supreme Court has deemed PNM's acquisition of the Four Corners plant as an imprudent investment. So I've highlighted two warning signs blinking bright red, and I have heard, and I'm sure will continue to hear other red blinking signs during this testimony. In the interest of all New Mexicans, the proposed PNM Avangrid merger should be rejected. Thank you very much for allowing my comments.
Okay, thank you. Okay, well, I see someone on the screen that's just identified as District 3. There's no name associated, but go ahead and unmute and make your comment.
Yes, state and spell your name, please.
Barry Dixon, Barrydixon.
Thank you, sir.
Go ahead.
Okay, I too am a citizen of the state of New Mexico and a lifelong resident of this. I'm also the business manager of the International Union of Operating Engineers, Local 953. And I represent the coal miners that are being affected by this shutdown of the San Juan generating station. My members have continued to suffer long since the ETA has been recently held hostage by an NGO in front of the Supreme Court. And we've had miners laid off already and who were eligible for this compensation, and they have received none. And so I'm afraid that this PNM merger that's being attempted, it seems like the same thing is happening. Different organizations are attempting to hold this process hostage also. And that really disturbs me when our infrastructure, the state of New Mexico, and what can come in and possibly come in infrastructure money from our US government to help the state of New Mexico and all the trades that are being affected and the inability to build and continue our infrastructure monies. So I'm in strong favor of the merger. I know it affects my members greatly because we are currently being affected. So once again, I said I support this merger. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That concludes the people that I see on my list and that I see in the waiting room to make public comment. Before we close, I guess I'd ask that ask if the commissioners have any closing words to make before we finish here.
Ashley, this is Commissioner Fishman.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank everybody for coming prepared, making thoughtful comments. We got lots of perspectives and points of view, and that's what these discussions are for. So just thank you to everybody who participated, and thank you for coming prepared.
Yeah, Commissioner Hall joined us here at the very beginning, but joined us soon after. Commissioner Hall or Commissioner Maestas, you have anything you'd like to add?
Hearing Examiner Shanauer, I just want to also thank every commenter for being so well prepared and timely and thoughtful. Everybody was thoughtful about this and respectful, as you mentioned. So I have no other comments and no further questions. Thank you.
Commissioner Maestas, anything? Okay, you're muted, but I can't tell whether you have anything to say or not. But yeah, I'd like to also thank everyone for their comments. Well, one more time, Mike Melendez, are you able to speak now? No? Okay. Well, yeah, I want to thank everyone for their comments and encourage people to tune in to the evidentiary hearings that are going to start on Wednesday, and they'll be available for viewing through the YouTube facility on the Commission's website. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, David. Thank you for taking care of this, and this hearing's concluded. Thank you all.